Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Deep Focus Show. I'm Aiden,
And I'm Andrew.
and we're going through the 60s now of our Oscars series, where we go year by year and pick which we think should have won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, etc. All the over the line awards. Last time we uh, finished with the first half, we got to 1964, and this time we're going to finish up the decade. So, just before we get started, do you have any kind of general thoughts on this period of movies?
Yeah, I mean, I think because I was a big fan of the early 60s, so I think it was difficult to top that first half, but you do see a real kind of changing of the tide happening here. We're kind of shifting. It's kind of the transition between the golden age to this new Hollywood style, more modern sensibilities coming in, censorship repealed. So it's definitely interesting to look at. I think I lean towards the earlier stuff in this decade, but there'll be lots of cool ones to talk about as well.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm probably totally 50-50 split. I don't think I would be able to choose the first or second half. This has got a lot of very strong films, a lot of films in my all-time top films ever list, so that's very exciting. Um, but yeah, you want to kick us off into 65?
For sure. So 65. This was a bit of a weird year for me because the movies that I'm most familiar with here, there's really only a couple that kind of stood out, but I don't think it's quite as deep as maybe some of the other years we'll be discussing, but there's still a few marquee ones I can pull out. For Best Picture, I'm going to lean into the kind of the more sentimental side with Sound of Music, grand, charming, kind of life affirming. I'm not too big on musicals most of the time, but this one definitely has its stamp in pop culture and very iconic. For director, I'll give that to David Lean, Dr. Zhivago. And again, I'm not a big period drama guy either, but this one has the advantage of like an intimacy between the characters to go along with the ambitious runtime. Beautiful shots. I really like snow-covered settings, and you get some great scenes there with this here. And for screenplay, I'm going with The Collector, which is, I believe it did get a nomination. It's a thriller involving like a psychopath named Terrence Stamp, and he stalks and abducts this woman. And then we kind of follow this captor-captive dynamic as it evolves from there. And I kind of like when these types of stories get the A-list treatment. It could have been a B movie, but they make it really uh, top class as well. And for actor, I'm mostly sticking to year of release, but this was another Casablanca situation where it got a showing in 1964, but a wider release the year after. So for that, I'm going with Rod Steiger, The Pawnbroker. And this is a dark film. Rod Steiger runs a pawn shop years after losing his family in the Holocaust. Very bitter and indifferent about life, lonely, emotionally checked out. For actress, I'm going with Catherine Deneuve, Repulsion. This is a very claustrophobic and disturbing film with her in the middle of it. She's this young woman holed up in her apartment, suffers from hallucinations, becomes increasingly unstable over the course of the film, and kind of lives and dies by believing in the psychosis of this character. For supporting actor, I'm giving that to Ian Bannon from Flight of the Phoenix. He plays the character of Crow, and it's interesting because he's kind of like the comic relief and could very easily get on your nerves in a serious situation, but he has also pulls his weight, so it's not an easy tone to pull off, and it's a nice character actor role there. And then for supporting actress, I'm going with Shelley Winters in A Patch of Blue, and she was the actual Academy winner here, plays the nasty mother to Elizabeth Hartman's character, and in stark contrast to Sidney Poitier's humanity, she brings like every villainous quality to the table as this like racist, vulgar, abusive, mean person, and one of those characters that's very easy to hate, and she makes you feel it. And those are my picks for 65.
Great choices. definitely line up with you in a few places. Best Picture for me is Dr. Zhivago, one of my favorite movies ever. I think, this is kind of the peak of David Lean, this era between this and Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia, all those movies. And this is just a great film. Sometimes I think this may be even better than Lawrence of Arabia because it has an epic quality to it, very literary sense with the frame story and the kind of emotion from the characters. I think it's very strong. Best director, I also did Lean for this, and also script Robert Bolt for this movie. I just think it's a super amazing collaboration between writer and director here. We have, a story that's adapted from a novel that's massive and gargantuan. It'd be kind of hard to film. And it's, paired into this pretty reasonable 3.5 hour runtime. And then the direction is just super strong and it nails the characters. For the lead actor awards, I'm going to say, gonna throw something to my number two favorite movie of the year, which is The Sound of Music, another of my favorite movies ever by anyone. So I'll do Christopher Plummer and Julie Andrews for actor and actress because I think that lead roles is just very important for a film like this. And I love the music here. I love the direction, but it's definitely the lead actors that make the story memorable and give it both the kind of emotion from the romance subplot and also the political dimension. And it's just very impressive. And then for supporting actor, I'm going to say Alec Guinness as Yevgraf in Zhivago because I think in a way he's kind of the heart of the film, even though he has a superficially small role. He's very important to the emotion of the story. And I really admire kind of the way he plays his character differently in the flashback versus the present. And then supporting actress, I'll say Julie Christie in Dr. Zhivago, because I think she just does an amazing job of pairing with Omar Sharif. But I think, this is a very early role for her, and she just totally knocks it out of the park. So yeah, very, very strong year, definitely dominated by those two epics. There's a lot of other great movies that I could have put, but I just couldn't really see an argument for them in any of the categories, even though I think they're great movies. There's stuff like Bunny Lake is Missing. There's For a Few Dollars More. There's Thunderball. There's a lot of really great movies that probably deserve nominations, but they just kind of are dwarfed by like the epics in my mind. But yeah, very strong year.
Nice. A little bit of overlap in kind of in different categories. For 66, Best Picture, I'm going to go with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Pretty much the definitive spaghetti western film. All elements working well between a great score, strong cast, memorable characters, stylish filmmaking. And director, I'm going to go with John Frankenheimer for Seconds. And this is a movie, the man kind of gets in a company that forges new identities using plastic surgery. Another one of those ones that feels like a feature-length Twilight Zone. But I think what stands out here more than the script is that it's very cinematic and artful with how they do it. Great use of the camera in key moments to really bring out the paranoia of the situation. And then for screenplay, I'm going with Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. No surprise that plays lend themselves well to film adaptations like this one. Gotta love the simple setups, a dinner party between like a middle-aged and a younger couple, a marriage's ugly side, and the complications of their relationship getting laid bare. And one of the notable instances of breaking ground on the format and changing times, they were still under the production code here, but and then like there was controversy over some of the language being included, but at the end of the day, it got pushed through. And it's, I guess I would consider it one of those moments where you kind of see the shift happening. And I'm going to keep that going, talking about that film for Best Actor and Actress, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. For a movie to land like this, you really need the two playing off each other, and they don't disappoint. And would be remiss not to point out they were a real-life married couple at the time, which certainly adds a level of intimacy to their performance, takes a special kind of chemistry to have two characters psychologically abusing each other like that. For supporting actor, Eli Wallach, Good, the Bad, and the ugly character of the title, brings charisma as like the entertainingly vile Tuco, resourceful, scheming, but also funny and uncultured, adds a little extra spice to the film to make it more than just good guy versus bad guy. And then one more time to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf with Sandy Dennis. Clearly the structure of this film really served as a great platform for acting showcases, and really another deserving winner here, I think, is Honey. She's more timid and neurotic, equally worn down as the evening goes on, and the drinking kind of lowers her inhibitions. So yeah, that's very much a character acting film. So, and now I realize that I'm really the two films dominating this year for me.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's hard to justify, breaking up the classics like that, I get that. That was me with 65, so it's all right. My best picture this year, I'm lining up with you with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's just a definitive kind of epic spaghetti western. I think all of the directing is where it needs to be. The acting's very strong. The story is simple, but it's got a kind of anthemic, universal quality that's very appealing to me. And just overall, it's a cinematic experience like no other, especially with the music and all that. And this kind of era is really when Morricone kind of distinguishes himself as one of the great film scorers. Best director, I'm gonna do Hilo Pontecorvo for The Battle of Algiers, which is a movie I was introduced to very recently as a completely unique experience, a total documentary treatment of the subject matter. I'd heard so much about it, and to see it has such an immediacy that it really feels like a literal depiction of the events of the Algerian Revolution, even though obviously it's a staged fiction film. It really speaks to the impressive kind of vision of a director to be able to realize that in such a realistic manner. Best screenplay, I'll do Billy Wilder, The Fortune Cookie. I think it's just hard to beat Wilder as a writer. Like, you just watch his films and they're so well put together in terms of the characters, kind of motivations, the way things are set up, planted, and then pay off later. There's just such an art to the way he always approached film storytelling, and this is probably one of the last times I'll get to highlight that with a nomination. So definitely had to make the most of it. Best actor is for a film I'm kind of actually not. I don't love this film as much as others by this director, but I'm gonna go with Chimes at Midnight, Best Actor for Orson Welles, because I think his performance is just super strong as Falstaff. He has a total kind of bittersweet quality to the acting, and even though the film suffers from kind of uneven filmmaking due to the low budget and like the poor camera and sound equipment, I think his performance always is a very strong highlight. Uh, Best Actress, I'll say Elizabeth Taylor for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I agree with pretty much everything you highlighted, that it's just such a commanding performance. And it's like the way the whole movie is structured, it essentially gives her more and more room to shine as the film goes on, and the way she plays this character in like such a psychological crisis, and the way she and the chemistry with Richard Burton as the other lead is just super super strong, comes across in the film very strongly. Um, Best supporting actor, I'll say again, The Fortune Cookie with Walter Matthau. I always love his kind of comic persona throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, his like, scheming, charming kind of just kind of, and especially with Jack Lemmon, it's a classic pairing for a reason. And also very strong later with The Odd Couple, which I didn't have in this awards, but I probably should have. So yeah, just very great stuff here. And then I'll line up with you again for supporting actress with Sandy Dennis. I really love her character in this movie. I love how similarly she uh, performs stronger and stronger the further you get into the film. And it's all about the character with this film. And it's something that comes across very well from everyone. And yeah, just a great movie.
Very nice. All right, so 67. I think I split things up pretty well this time. So for Best Picture, going with The Graduate, another great film that kind of signifies the tide turning culturally, exploring new territory like the generational divide, sexual freedom, uncertainty with the world coming out of college. Super well made and performed, a lot of memorable lines and scenes, and iconic ending. Excellent use of the soundtrack too. For director, I'm gonna highlight Terrence Young, Wait Until Dark. And this is a thriller very much in like the Hitchcock tradition. Simple story, blind woman alone in her apartment unknowingly comes into possession of this doll, has to fend for herself in an apartment as the criminals try to get it back. And I'm highlighting it here because it's another one that could just be like a B thriller, but it's really played as a super tense and creepy film, and another great example of engaging filmmaking tied to one location for the most part. And then for screenplay, In the Heat of the Night, and here you have Sidney Poitier's character as the detective from Philadelphia. He gets mixed up in a murder investigation in small town Mississippi. The local chief has prejudice, like his own prejudices, and soon recognizes his skills anyways. But many of the townsfolk are having none of it. And with racism still rampant, you have this investigation pulling out the racial tension and the secrets behind the case at the same time. So it's pretty much tackling these timely issues at the time pretty head on through the lens of this homicide story. It's quite a neat time capsule of society in transition. And I am giving Sidney Poitier Best Actor, but he had like 3 big films this year. And I actually think I'm going to highlight To Sir with Love for this one, because I think he has to do a lot of heavy lifting in that film. It's basically him versus his students in the classic tradition of a teacher trying to win over his class who don't initially accept him as their new headmaster. And I think he brings an important combination of dignity and stubbornness to that role that it needs. For actress, I'm going to go with Faye Dunaway in Bonnie and Clyde. Committing herself as the bored young woman turned crime-spree robber brings like this touch of Hollywood glamour to what on the paper might seem an unflattering character. And again, she has great chemistry with Warren Beatty as to make this story really land. One more time to Bonnie and Clyde, supporting actor Gene Hackman, the actual winner of the year, and a breakout performance for an actor who would have a really accomplished career ahead of him. Plays Clyde's brother Buck, and it's another one of the character types who can keep things light and carefree until the chips are down, and then he can be as dangerous as anyone too. And I think Hackman brings a lot of charisma to just about every role. And lastly, supporting actress Anne Bancroft, The Graduate. Mrs. Robinson made such an impact on pop culture. It'd be easy to forget that there's quite a bit of complexity to the character. She's like predatory and seductive, but also sad and vulnerable and bitter. So it's a hard part to play, and I think it speaks to the performance, the kind of legacy that the film has endured.
Yeah, great picks. This is a super hard year because this is a year that I think has totally strong films that I had to just not have on this at all. I didn't even have The Dirty Dozen or The Graduate on my picks, even though those are both amazing movies. But it's just there's so many great movies this year that it's getting harder and harder to justify what's getting awards and what's not for me. Best Picture, my favorite movie this year is Cool Hand Luke. I think it's a really great anti-establishment, kind of poetic anti-Vietnam film, which I think is the way it kind of reflects the zeitgeist without being obviously about it is very cool. The way it combines that with a very universal story and with the um, Christian New Testament imagery in a very it's a very kind of um, I think literary treatment of the material, and I think it's highlighted by a great story, great script, and then great acting. Best director, there's a lot of spaghetti westerns this year. I wanted to highlight Sergio Solima, his work on The Big Gun Down, which is a really strong performance from Lee Van Cleef, with Thomas Milan in it as well as it's obviously highly inspired by Leone's Dollars trilogy, but it has a very unique approach. But there's other great spaghetti westerns this year, like Petroni's Death Rides a Horse, Valeri's Day of Anger. There's just too many to mention, so I just picked one as I think a strong representative of this era of spaghetti westerns. My favorite script, I'm going with a movie I think is phenomenally underrated, which is Two for the Road, Stanley Donen's film. I think it's the non-linear story is phenomenal. The way it juggles the different eras of these characters' lives, I really enjoy. And it's anchored together by a script that if this script was even 1% less well thought out, things would not make much sense because it would just skip between different eras. You have to have a total command of the emotional through line of the story to be able to skip between, five different time periods of two characters' lives without it feeling just random and jumbled. You need a total command of that kind of material. Best actor, I'm saying Paul Newman in Cool Hand Luke because I think it's a iconic performance, a very iconic performance, and it works because of that actor. I don't think anyone else could have pulled off the role with it working the same way. He has to be totally smug and confident while at the same time being completely humble and selfless. And I don't think I can think of any other actors that can nail what seems like a idiosyncratic or contradictory combination that way. Um, Best actress, I'll say Audrey Hepburn, Two for the Road. This is one of her very last roles, and I think it's probably her best role in any movie. She has an incredibly hard task before her in playing this main character from the time that she's 20 to the time that she's 35 in one film and trying to make the subtle changes across that time period feel very believable. It's a very tough job, and she does an amazing job. I think a little bit better than Albert Finney. He's good in the movie too, but I don't think he quite nails the change of character quite like she does, where you feel like 15 years has passed between the beginning and the end. And then um, supporting actor, I have Rod Steiger in The Heat of the Night. I actually rewatched this movie a couple weeks ago to prep for this episode, along with some others like Cool Hand Luke. I also rewatched that one recently for this. But this is just an awesome performance, and it really highlighted in my mind how Rod Steiger is a total chameleon of an actor, in that he can play any uh, country really of person, any background. I've seen him in movies like Zhivago, where he does the Russian character, Duck You Sucker with the Mexican bandit, and then older films, Harder They Fall with the kind of Brooklyn gangster. And here he's playing this kind of racist Mississippi cop, and it's like, oh yeah, I totally believe this. Like it's that pure like Stanislavski method acting era where you just totally buy that he's this guy, and that's kind of the perfect That's the best acting job in a way when you only see the character, you don't see the actor. And then supporting actress, I'm gonna go with Eleanor Braun because she's in two very good movies this year in supporting roles, both directed by Stanley Donen. Again, Two for the Road, which I mentioned, and also Bedazzled, which is a great comedy film. And in both of them, she has a strong role in the film. Different characters, of course. In Two for the Road, she plays the American housewife who represents the opposite ideal that you want our two main characters to be in. And then in Bedazzled, she has a comic role more so. And in both movies are very strong. Both movies, she does a very good job. So yeah, it's always fun when you have the opportunity to highlight an actor for more than one film across a year, or even director sometimes. So yeah, very strong crop of years.